Hello, Jacob.
Hello.
Well, it's good seeing you again. It's been what? How long?
I don't know, 4 days?
4 days. So I was at Gary Con, walking along the vendor booths and minding my own business. And there's this really tall dude. It took me about 30 seconds to look all the way up, all the way up. And I recognized way in the distance a familiar face. I had no idea that tall, Jacob.
Nice. Well, there you go.
I look up, it's like, whoa. I was not expecting to see you there behind the table selling product at GaryCon.
That's right. Gotta hustle.
You gotta hustle.
Mhm.
That was quite an experience, I think, for everybody.
It was a good con. I was glad to be able to go. I mean, technically, that's my first convention where I've had my own booth outside the state of Texas, and so it was good.
Yeah. And you're looks like you're in a pretty actually that whole setup that I was talking to the I can't remember who I was talking to. I was talking to a lot of people. The I think to me it felt this is my first time being at Gary Con. It felt like compared to Game Hall Cons with the others, it's like the space was like tighter, but it
Mhm.
wasn't constricting. So it made everything feel busy all the time.
Yeah, it was a very interesting layout because that hotel or the resort, right? Um, it's basically one long hallway, right? And so you go from one end to the other, and then the games are just kind of scattered throughout it. So then, yeah, it is. There's a lot of people coming and going, and I guess you can go outside, but um, you know, then it snows on Saturday, and I was not prepared for that. But
Did it ever
yeah,
snow?
yeah, it did. Yeah, it did. So,
Yeah,
but
I
yeah, no, it
was
was good. So, yeah, lots of hustle and lots of bustle. I was really worried, because the vendor hall was all the way at one end. I mean, it felt going in very far away from the convention itself, but still, I mean, the entire time, like it was pretty busy. There were consistently people coming through there, which was really awesome.
well, my GPS, my phone got me quote unquote to there. I still didn't understand what I was looking at, and I kept driving around and I found a parking spot, and that was full. Found another parking spot, and that was full. I'm like, I have no idea. Guess I'll follow this car, and I go down the hill and into an airstrip.
Oh, nice.
It's like I had to park on an airstrip. I thought
Wow.
I thought this is kind of weird. I wonder. I guess I got to walk, but then they had a trolley come pick us up. So
Oh, nice. Okay. I saw the trolley. I didn't realize the trolley was going to, but I had to get there so early in the morning that I was able to squeeze into the parking lots, which was good because I was nervous about that
yes,
at first.
wouldn't that be terrible? You get all the way there, and you can't park close enough to get your stuff unloaded.
But no, it all worked out. It was very good. It was very nice. And there were, I mean, like I said, tons of people, very busy, and everybody was doing stuff. So it was good. Everybody seemed very excited to be back in convention mode, is what it felt like to me.
Yeah, yeah. And as excited as everybody was in getting into convention mode, a couple days later, I was getting notifications from friends that have either they themselves or a company I was with, people having COVID. Uh,
Nice.
so I guess we're still, I guess we're still in these times. So
Well, I came home and then like my kids are sick and I don't know. So I was like, so I don't know if maybe like I've gotten something from them now coming back, which of course that's how I was like, I was fine for the convention. I was fine at the convention and then I come back and then it's waiting for me at home, right? You
well,
can't you can't avoid it.
no, those kids, I mean, those schools and different things, they're all just petri dishes, just
Oh
full of
yes.
just, yeah, it's just, yeah, you're probably better off with a bunch of, at a con than you are with a bunch of
Right.
kids.
Right. Exactly.
So how
Exactly.
far is it for you what part of Texas are you from?
So I'm in South Texas. Technically I live
Wow.
pretty much exactly on Interstate 10. And I figure that if the real world had an achievement system, I probably would have unlocked something because I made it from, Interstate 10 all the way up to Interstate 90, which I think is kind of where the U.S. interstate system pretty much caps out. But maybe not. So yeah, that was fun. But I made it, and I made it back, and I'm in one piece, and I have all my books with me. So there we go.
Yeah, that's quite a haul. I've especially hauling. I'm assuming you had a trailer that you were pulling.
No, everything fit in my car, which was nice. So that's one thing that's good. I mean, and I have a little car too, so I don't have that many book titles, and I could bring like a box of each book, and it worked out pretty good.
Well, I guess because you didn't have to worry about having a table.
Yeah, yeah, because the table was there for me, so I have my little banner that I can put up. I forgot to bring my pop-up banners, of course, but it's fine.
There's always going to be something.
Oh yeah,
At least you remembered your books.
right.
Because
Exactly.
famous stars can't sign your books if they're not there to sign. At least that's what I've heard. I don't know.
Exactly. Exactly. Jeez.
You are somebody now. Do you ever watch The Jerk?
It's been such a long time since
No.
I've watched The Jerk, a long time, but that's a really good movie. It's one of my dad's favorite movies, and like we watched it quite a few times, but it's been years since I've seen it.
Well,
But
one of
yeah.
my favorite parts is when Nathan R. Johnson was living in the gas station,
hmm
and he finally got his name in the phone book. So he flips through the phone book and he sees his name, and he starts, jumping up and down, exclaiming, "I am somebody! I am
Right.
somebody! I am somebody!"
Right.
And then it cuts to a scene where a guy randomly placing his finger in the phone book, who's a serial killer,
hmm
and says Nathan R. Johnson. So that anytime something good happens to me, I'll say, "I am
Yes.
somebody, I am somebody, I am somebody." Just knowing that there's always
I dig it.
somebody saying Nathan R. Johnson, he's
E-
dead.
exactly. Exactly.
So what sort of famous people signed your books here, Jacob?
Well, I mean, famous
Or
people
signed
didn't
your books, but
sign
bought
my
your books, I should
books.
say.
They
Yes.
bought my books.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So the infamous Joe Manganiello came and bought my books, which
I
was
got
really
so
cool.
bamboozled, I forgot who was doing the signing.
Right. But yeah, no. So he came by and got my books, which was really cool. And so I mean, I would say in large part it was thanks to a couple people. There's Ben Riggs and who
Oh,
wrote, what is it
yeah.
that oh my gosh, I can't think of the name of the book right now. I should rep
Dragons?
it.
Something
Yeah,
dragons?
Slaying the Dragon, right? Let
Sounds
me just
good.
check. We'll do a Google search just to make sure that I know what I'm talking. Yeah, it is Slaying the Dragon. Yeah, because it was a history of Dungeons and Dragons. It's very good.
Yeah.
I've read, I haven't been able to read the entire book, but I've made it at least, about halfway through. Um, and so that's really cool. So he did all of these interviews of people who had worked at TSR, during its heyday and its decline and everything, to write his history book. And then Joe Manganiello is kind of doing a similar thing, but making a documentary. And for whatever reason, I don't know how this happened, but Ben was interviewing Joe for a while, and during that conversation, so the way it was told to me was during the conversation, Ben was like, "Yeah, everything that Wizards of the Coast releases now right now is terrible anyway." And supposedly Joe said, "Well, so like, who's good? What's good?" And Ben said, Hot Springs Island, and they're here, so you should go check it out. And so he tells me this, and I'm like, oh, that's great. And Ben also said, like, by the end of their conversation, Joe was like, "You're my friend now," and cool stuff. And you never know, like, you never know. And so I was like, oh, well, that's really cool. Like, thanks for telling me this, Ben. I think that was on like Friday that he did that,
Yeah.
and then Saturday, Joe was coming in to sign autographs, and stops at my booth and says, "You're the person I'm looking for." And I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
Okay.
Hope that was a good
Um,
way.
no, it's great. Well, another thing that's really cool is that so for the Tomb of Black Sand, I commissioned this guy named Tim Hastings who goes by Mind Killer Inc. on Instagram, and he's great. But one of the things that I commissioned from him was to do the Tomb of Black Sand like a script sort of logo, right? And as part of that, I had said to him, I was like, "Hey, dude, it would be really cool if since you're making a lot of letters, if it's not that much of a pain in the butt, like how much more would it be to just go ahead and make it a font? Because maybe I can use that font for the headings in the book and stuff too." Um, and one of my big stipulations was like, when you make it, just release it and let anybody do whatever they want to do with it. Um, and so, and this was several years ago at this point. Um, and he did, and he released the font. And then I guess Joe has been doing that death saves brand where it's like, D&D shirts, and he has like some dice and stuff. And they made these black and white dice, and they used the Tomb of Black Sands font for the numbers on the dice. So then Joe's at the booth and he sees the Tomb of Black Sand. He's like, the Tomb of Black Sand, like the font. And I was like, yes. And so that
Did
was
you
that
tell
was
him
pretty awesome.
you're gonna issue a cease and desist order to him? It's just,
No,
Joe, you're
no,
ripping
no.
me off.
Right, exactly. I was like, oh, I shouldn't have, let anybody use it for whatever, but I don't care. It's fine. It's great. It was really nice. And so, and actually that was one of the things that was kind of crazy, is that he has been following me on Instagram for a while, because there was a conversation that I was having with Tim, because I guess he did a shirt for Death Saves that had rage written really really nicely lettered across it. And I think Tim did that rage writing. And so like we had a little conversation in the comments. And then one day, or that same day or the day after, it was like, Joe Manganiello was following you. And at that time, I was like, I don't even know who this guy is. I think he
Right.
had like 1.4 million followers. And I was like, what is this? And so then I'm looking at this, like I walked out onto the back patio, looking at my phone, like some person with like a lot of followers just followed me. Like, what is that? And my wife is like, who? And she looks over and then almost falls on the ground.
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
oh my God, he's following you. So then I told him that too when he came up to do this. I was like, listen, I just wanted to, thank you so much for like following me on Instagram, because you did that a while ago. And, that really changed my wife's perspective about, what I do. Like she's taking what I do more seriously now. So,
Yeah.
I really appreciate you doing that. And so he thought that was funny, or acted like it was funny. He's an actor, right? But then he also said, he was like, yeah, it totally helped me out too. Cause he was like, yeah, my wife didn't really take my whole thing seriously with like having people coming over and playing games and stuff, until all of the Game of Thrones people came over and played at my house. And I was like, oh, well, all right. So there you go. Yeah, that's my little brush. My little brush. So he got Hot Springs Island, the Tomb of Black Sand, and a copy of the Jack Vance Whist book that I did. And I don't know. There we go. Hopefully he likes them.
Well,
Hopefully.
I know you've sold I know you sold at least two, and horse traded for another one. I got the scoop on on those other dudes. I can't remember who the ones you had the zines you recommended.
The older guys with the ARG. I can't remember the gaming research guys. They were really fantastic. Like I loved their stuff. I haven't had a chance to really read through them, but I mean, I got this stack of zines that was probably that tall at the convention of these guys. I mean, I don't know. They're probably in their mid to upper 70s, maybe a little older, and like they
Yeah.
were there selling their zines. And it was awesome because they were printing their zines live and stapling them and putting them together and like offering them there and telling people to sign up for their stuff. And they had all these sticks, like walking sticks, and I guess they were whittling some of them, or one of the guys was like whittling some of them and making them into knives and cups and stuff. Because the whole thing with their zines is they're very historically focused, and they're very, I would say, nitty gritty, I guess, where they like to get super into the details. For example, like how much does 50 feet of rope actually weigh? How much could it actually carry? How much could, like, what kind of jerk force or jerk rating or whatever would it have, before it snapped? Like, could you pull up a guy in plate mail armor on it? And, I think one of the guys was like, and Gary said in the AD&D manual that, 50 pounds of rope weighs 10 pounds. And like, here it is right here. Does this weigh 10 pounds to you? And I'm like, no, this doesn't weigh 10 pounds. But I don't know that I would necessarily care, but that's okay. But the thing that really made it amazing, in my opinion, I picked up one of the zines, or two of the zines first, just to go through them. And one of them, they were talking about just like the layouts of medieval villages. And the thing that was so great is that they had all these pictures, and they had all of these examples, and they were all sourced. And they're like, these are the places, like this came from these books, this came from these places on archive.org. So like they were immaculately sourced, in my opinion. I mean, it was really just kind of like physical blog posts, right? But with really good sourcing, and it was just great stuff. So then I went back and I was like, I want to buy all the rest of them. So I bought all the rest of them. Um, and then they were like, you want all of them? Well, like, maybe we could trade. And so then I was like, well, maybe we'll do a trade. So we did a little bit of a trade. Well, but then they were like, well, you'll have to have something that we want. And so I was like, well, that's fine. I mean, like, that's okay. I'm not gonna force you to take my stuff. But then, yeah, we did a little trade, and so it was good. They had great stuff. And they made a halfling war spoon. I believe it was out of walnut. I don't remember what wood it was, but it was like a dense like war spoon. And at one point I looked up and Tim Kask was there, you know, like swinging it around his head. And apparently he bought it from them. So I was not able to get the halfling war spoon to go with it because like that was their whole thing with the wood, is that they were like carving it into different shapes and then rating it and trying to like come up with, you know, better stats for these things, or more you know, judge the accuracy of what was in the old school like D&D books and stuff. And I'm like, this is great. It's very good inspirational fodder. I don't feel like a lot of that stuff would ever really come up in my games, but I do feel like it's one of those things where, you know, they're so detailed about a lot of things that if you picked one or two little items to talk about or work with, um, it'd be great. Like it would be really fun. I mean, and one of the other guy, like I got him talking about poison, and he was going on and on and on about poison and about shurikens. And apparently, the whole reason that you can carry shurikens around is because they were the washers on like the temple doors or whatever. And so then you just kind of sharpen them and you could throw them. And that the reason you put the ribbon on the back of needles is because when you're throwing needles is because it helps them fly straighter. And then here are these different types of poison that you can do, and yada yada yada, and they come from these common things and blah blah. And I'm just like, I love this. I'm so into this. But yeah, there you go. And apparently one of the big impetus behind shurikens, which I'm like, this is fantastic for an adventure, is so supposedly they were used by farmers who were trying to keep their land safe from bandits, because if bandits are coming through, then you have the farmers hiding in the forest, and they throw the shuriken, you know, and it goes across and it like cuts the guy's arm, you know, cuts a bandit's arm, and it's like, oh, it's a ghost, and he's like slashing you because it's like a sword cut or whatever. I don't know if that's true or not, but
But
that was
we
the
want
story I was told,
that.
and I was like, that would make a phenomenal adventure thing where it's like it's a haunted forest, but it's just peasants throwing shurikens across the road, like cutting people. Like I'm sold. I'm sold. I don't care if it's true or not. I don't
Yeah.
need to research that any further. That I will. That is, it's that whole. It may be bullshit, but I believe it. Like,
Yeah. No, they were the one, I forget, oh, it was Steve, the one guy that I think is he was behind the table, and he was pretty animated. And I said, you know, I want, based on what you're doing, I said, I want one of each. I said, what kind of discount can
nice.
I get? So he gets the other guy, and the other guy comes in, the older, I don't say older guy.
Sure.
He was apparently the businessman. He's like, well, he goes, we'll give it to you for 75. He goes, but he goes, he goes, yeah, hey, you go, are you eligible for any other discount? And I'm like, he goes, are you, are you ex-military? Are you
Okay.
police? Are you teacher? I'm like, no, 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 no. And he looked at me as well. Is there any reason I should give you a discount? I said, well, I got a podcast. Have you come on my podcast? He's like,
Hey.
I'm not interested in a podcast.
Oh.
So I'll just take it for the $75.
Yeah.
Because
That was.
it's kind of in some ways, I figure me buying this is kind of like a Patreon.
Yeah.
These people are doing the
Absolutely.
Lord's work. I don't know
Mhm.
what they're doing. I don't know why they're doing it, but you know what? They should be doing this. And
Yeah.
for anybody that, yeah,
It's really cool. Yes, I definitely want to support it. Like legit. Hmm.
it's just so funny. Yeah. So anyway, one guy is willing to come on, the other guy not so much. So
Nice.
yeah,
Was
that was
it?
pretty. Oh,
Is
go
it the
ahead.
guy who was wearing the mask that's gonna come on? Because one
Well,
guy had
no,
the mask and the other guy had the beard.
no, the one guy wasn't wearing a mask, but the
Okay.
one that has the beard was not the one coming on.
Oh, but it was the other guy. Well, maybe he took it off at one point. Every time I
Yeah.
saw him, he had a mask on. But yeah, like if it's the guy I'm thinking of, if you can get him talking about poisons and shurikens, like please, like that. we need we need more of that because it was great. It was great.
Yeah, it's just it was just fun seeing this. I guess just them being so intensely focused and animated
Hmm.
and committed. I mean, it's a level of commitment. It's like evangelical level of, like, the masses have to know
Hmm.
that 50 foot of rope only weighs 3 pounds. The masses
Right.
have to know this.
It needs to be corrected. Yeah,
Yes, it does.
I'm good with that. That's awesome.
So I think so you get there. Is it Wednesday you set up for the
Yes. let's see, what did I do? I was here on Monday. I drove up on Tuesday. It was Tuesday, Wednesday. Um, and so I got there late on Wednesday. I didn't set up until Thursday morning, like the day of the convention itself. But yeah, a lot of people got up there, early and were setting up on Wednesday.
Wonder it had been too risky though. It's like I wonder if you could have, but shipping the books would really wouldn't have saved anything because you're just driving your car.
No,
So
exactly. I mean, that was the problem that I was having with it is because this convention, Gary Con was in Lake Geneva. It doesn't have a major airport, and so it's about an hour and a half outside of Milwaukee. It's about an hour and a half outside of Chicago, which makes it a nice spot. And there are a lot of people from Milwaukee and Chicago who come. Is what it seems like. Like it seems like a really good regional convention for up there. But when I was looking at it, I was like, okay, well, I could pay to have the books, freighted up. Um, to the convention, which would be good, and then maybe I can fly up. But then it's like, well, I'm gonna have to rent a car, and if I rent a car,
right.
then that's gonna cost me. By the time I ship them up and rent the car and do all that and buy the plane ticket, I'm like, I'll save a lot of money by just like spending the time driving up there. And originally, my buddy Donnie was supposed to come with me, which was going to make it work better because then we could take turns driving and whatnot. But then he was not able to come, so I flew solo, or I guess I drove solo. Um, but still, worked out. It was fine. Cause yeah, no, I definitely looked into options, being like, well, maybe if I shipped it there, maybe if I did, whatever. Cause that's been a very I don't know, stressful thing to try and figure out where it's like, I'd like to go to some other conventions. I'd like to go out of the state or maybe even out of the country. Let's be crazy. Let's go to, something in Europe. Um,
Whoa.
but I mean, why not? um, but I don't know. It's that whole getting the books there. And so if it's something like PAX Unplugged, which is in what is it? Is that in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh? One of the two. It's in one of the big Pennsylvania cities. I know that much. Um, you know, if I have the books shipped freighted up there and then I fly up there, I can fly to the city where the books are. I'm not forced to rent a car. It would make more sense like I could like get an Uber or a Lyft or something. I don't know, post in Discord if anybody can pick me up from the airport.
Well, the other thing you
You know?
may want to consider, I use World of Game Design for helping me with the Kickstarters and backer kit, but they also
Yeah.
hold inventory. And if they're already at conventions and they can sell your books as
hmm
well, you maybe I'll just inventory a lot of your books with them. And then the conventions you share with them, you just have them haul your books there and you set up your own booth.
Right. No, and they were great guys. And like I've done that kind of before with the Black Blade publishing guys as well cuz they go to North Texas RPG Con. Black Blade does. Cuz I think they're in Kansas, Nebraska, like so they're kind of like right in between these two. Um and so yeah, they've done that for me before where they've taken the Hot Springs Island books up to Gary Con when I couldn't be there, which is really cool. So yeah, and the guys from World of Game Design were like super nice and awesome, and I would love to do some stuff with them too. Because yeah, that would be fantastic. Because it is that whole like, well, how do I get my stuff there? What do I do? What teamwork options I guess are available. Yeah, because and maybe even I don't vend, but maybe I just like go and attend and run games and then show up at the World of Game Design booth or the Blackblade Publishing booth or something like that. Like
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah,
I don't know.
you could have your own and have them haul it and you just bring your books over and you both be selling. Or you could just, like you say, you could just have it your own separate table, maybe potentially.
Yeah, or share. Whichever. I don't know. I'm not super picky. I'm trying to figure it out.
I know we all are. So
Yeah.
the for so I've done art photography. I've done that before.
hmm
So this whole thing's not new to me. But so you go to conventions. Um are you it's a lot of hassle. You have to buy a fair amount of inventory. You have hotel rooms, you have food, um, which is a considerable amount of cost. I guess when you're doing these, are you looking to make money? Are you looking to say this is kind of like marketing, or what's your, what are you looking at when you're doing this?
Well, the one thing for me that I think is different than the art photography and for some guys who do books too, right? Like I don't do print on demand kind of stuff. Like I'm not having to decide, well, like how many prints am I going to make to take to this show. Um, I have the different curse, but a curse nonetheless, of where it's like, okay, I have 5 pallets of books, and I
Oh,
want those 5 pallets of books to go away. So I need to figure out how many I'm going to bring with me. Like how many boxes of books am I going to bring, to this? And I don't want to bring too many because then it takes up too much space, and I don't want to do whatever because like I already have the inventory. I don't have to. It's just a matter of like moving it. And so I don't know if it's maybe kind of a I don't know. I feel like I shouldn't have this goal. I feel like, because like I did sales and stuff, and it seems like having a low goal is not necessarily a good thing. Maybe that's my own fault. But I mean, my opinion has been if I'm breaking even, I'm winning. Just because of being able to meet people and hang out with people and, get invited to be on a podcast,
right.
conversation, stuff like that. Like, sell my books to Joe Manganiello. Like, okay, like, all right. No, it's fantastic being able to do those things, and I wouldn't have those opportunities, otherwise. Like it's, uh, but sort of the trade-off, is, well, like one of the things that I've been thinking about is that I have been making things, I tend to take a broad approach and not a deep approach, right? Like if I was smart, the whole thing that I should have been doing the entire time without losing any sort of focus whatsoever is I should have only been doing like Swordfish Islands, period. And that should have been it. And it should have been focused completely on making the rest of the islands. And that should be the whole thing. Um, but part of it was I was like, well, I should, make some zines. And then other people were saying like, hey, can you like you've suffered through the printing thing, can you get my book printed and stuff? And so maybe I'm not like a little bit of a publisher or something. But one of the things that comes with that, or I guess the really good example is like this whist book. I'm so happy that I was able to do this whist book for Jack Vance. And there is an overlap between the people who like Jack Vance books and the people who like, early Dungeons and Dragons stuff. So they're the Venn diagrams, they overlap, if you will. But they don't overlap completely. They are different audiences. And I think that's one of the things where it's like all of my stuff that I've done predominantly has been online. So one of the things of that is like the convention audience is an audience, that you kind of need to foster and potentially that you do foster. And so like one of the things for me that I saw at GaryCon, more specifically than some of the other ones, is like I don't have my new book finished. And I had at least like I started making tally marks after approximately 10 people came up. But I had at least 20 to 30 people that came up and either said, "Oh, I already have Hot Springs Island," or frequently they were like, "I already have everything on your table, and I want to give you money, but I have nothing to give you
Here,
money for
we're
right now."
begging you, make
Yeah, like
something.
please, yes, please give me something so I can pay you some stuff, but I can't do it right now.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of the things. So if you do start going to the conventions and you're hopping to those places, like there are similar, like the same people come every time, which is good because it is like a community. So you get to know people, you get to recognize people, you build relationships, I think, which is really nice. But then from like a vendor perspective or a creator perspective, there really is maybe more, I don't know if pressure is the right word, but it's kind of like you need to, like, your fans want something. You do need to time your releases for those conventions. It's much more important because if you go and you drive for 20 hours and you take all your boxes of books and you have all these people that are really nice and really complimentary and they love your stuff, but they don't have any reason to give you money, then that kind of, you sort of shoot yourself in the foot in some ways. So I can understand how some of the bigger labels, if you will, like they do really plan their stuff around conventions because I think it's I don't know, it's significant. Like that's the community, uh the aspect, the trade-off of it, sort
Yeah,
of.
I think if you're going to do that, you got to be. I mean, Gen Con's obviously the one that a lot of the big publishers aim
Sure.
at, but I think But if you're gonna, if you kind of look at it that way, I mean, and I think Gary Con or even potentially Gamehole Con, would be, or there's others probably as well, but
Sure.
but you're gonna have to be, but you're gonna have to be regular, I guess, in some ways. Well, I don't know, but yeah, I understand what you're saying. You got to have something fresh. You're
Yeah.
there. People are very, what's the word I'm looking for? Where it's that made the words compulsive is not the right word, but it's It's an impulse buy, really what it is.
Well, it is an impulse buy, but also like you talked about with the guys when you picked up all the zines, it's kind of like a Patreon. It's like I want to support you. I don't
Right.
necessarily,
But if I
like
would have
the
came home and thought about it, I wouldn't have ordered them.
right,
You were
right.
talking, you were talking about, you were talking them up. I went and talked to the dudes.
Mm.
They were wonderful people, characters.
Yes.
And at that moment, I'm like, I really don't care. I'll just buy. They're at $5 a piece. I didn't really buy that much anything else. And like
Hmm.
whatever they had that was reasonable, I would have bought.
Yeah. No,
And so,
exactly.
yeah.
But then I think that's the thing. So like one of the very first people in the community that really kind of like reached out to me after I did the first Kickstarter on Hot Springs Island was James Radji. And he was like, "Hey dude, like I'm going to be at Gen Con. Do you want to come and sort of like have your books in my booth at Gen Con? And you help me sell some lamentation stuff." And I was like, "Sure. I've never been to Gen Con ever. Like this would be really cool." So I went up there and I did that and it was awesome. And I actually did that a couple years. But the thing is that, and I saw it at that time too, where literally these guys would come up to James's booth and they would say, "Okay, I have everything on your table. Like I have this, I have this, I have this, I have this, I have this. All right, what's new this year?" And James would be like, "Well, I have these 4 books that are new this year." And they would just buy those 4 books. And like they wouldn't even ask about price. They wouldn't ask
Right.
about nothing. They'd be like, "Here's my card, give me the new stuff. I'm good to go." And it was like, it wasn't just like one person that did this, it was person after person after person after person. So like the convention scene, if you will, is a separate scene from the online, the
Right.
Twitter scene. There is again, there's definite overlap, like there is with like the Jack Vance scene and stuff. But it's a different world and you have to kind of treat it differently. And so that's part of the reason I think where I feel like I can justify saying like as long as I'm breaking even and I'm covering my booth and my car and the food and the hotel, it's worth it, because I'm seeing these people that I wouldn't necessarily see in other places. Like I wouldn't necessarily see them online. Or maybe I've seen them online but I've never been able to interact with them in person and it's a better thing.
Well,
Um
there is a point to that too, right? Because I mean, assuming you've got a good personality, because it could, I guess, could
yeah,
backfire if you're
sure. Well,
like, 'But you're right. You're actually making a connection with people.
yeah. Well, see, I think the thing about that I think is really kind of interesting too is that all right, so I changed the cover for Hot Springs Island and it now has a naked lady butt on the front and there's the big bad guy and he's got like a chain on her and when I posted this on Kickstarter, when I posted this online, there were a number of people, a small number of people, but there were very vocal people like, "This is the most horrible thing I've ever seen. I can't believe that you're doing this. I can't believe that you're going to be depicting, violence against women and blah blah." Like all like there was a moment where people were very upset. But when I am in person, those people that are loud on the internet, they are silent in real life. And the people that come by the booth are like, "I love this cover. This is the most amazing cover I've ever seen. This is phenomenal. This is fantastic. This is so great. This is so blah 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 blah." Everybody's like super complimentary. So I mean, I don't know. The people in meat space are different than people in internet space,
But
dramatically.
but see,
So
you bring up something that I've been kind of thinking about. So there's partner with someone else. We're looking at doing some sword and sorcery
mhm,
type adventures products, and looking at. We really wanted to go for like a comic book style for a cover, but I did find somebody that was very, very much in the style of Frazetta,
mhm.
and it was very like it was like full on ass cheeks. I mean, male and woman. So I guess
Yeah.
the question to do
Butts.
it again, ass cheeks, yes or no? Do they sell or do they not sell?
Well, I mean, I think the thing is that like number one, the reason that people say don't judge a book by its cover is because everybody judges books by their cover.
Right.
Period. And then one of the things also is that so supposedly, and I should get better. What's it called? I feel like I tell this story enough that I should really have better sources, and I don't have sources that I can just list. I'm not like those cool guys that wrote those zines that have immaculate sources. I don't have an
Yeah.
immaculate source for this, but supposedly Netflix did all of this studying, like all of these studies, to see like what people are clicking on, what's engaging people, and apparently if they showed an image of the bad guy of a series doing a bad thing, it increased user engagement on the platform. So I'm like, Hot Springs Island book cover, the bad guy is doing a bad thing. Sales haven't slowed down. People tell me that they love it. I mean, of course, people really like the black cover. I like the black cover, but the material cost was just like insane. So, and I had to make a decision on what to do. So when we decided to go with an art cover, it was like, let's have Svarku, you know, let's have Svarku be in Svarku. And that was kind of one of the things too. Like I did sort of leave it open to the artist as well. And he was like, this is what I want to paint. And so I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it. So yeah, I mean, I don't think that necessarily, I mean, I don't know that it has to be butt cheeks on the cover. I don't think that's necessary, but I don't think that people need to be afraid of putting butt cheeks on the cover. I don't want to say you should absolutely do it, but I don't think if that's what you want to do, I say you shouldn't be afraid of doing it. You should just do it. I mean, if you want to,
Embrace it.
yeah, depict what you want to depict, because ultimately it's a I don't know, it's an art object of, in some, like, it was created, like, you're gonna make it, you should make it the thing you want it to make. And if you're like, I really wanted butt cheeks on the cover but I didn't do it because I was scared, that's a bad choice. You should have stuck to your guns. But if you're like,
Yeah, so even Fame of the Fly God, there was this scene where there's supposed to be this undead king, basically. He's kept alive by being fed by these maggot people, and he's
lovely.
just can't move. He's just and so the guy, like, the artist's like, you want me to he's like, dude, you want me to show his thing or not show his thing? I'm like, I thought about it, I was like, you do what you want. I don't care. It's like, I'm not gonna tell you. He chose not to, which is probably better, but
Sure.
I was fine if he did. It's like, it's like we're going to the weird and the gross, and this is not a weird kind of thing. It's just, this guy being shown very vulnerable and
Right.
helpless.
Well, and
And
you're not they're not being intended to, like, go in Walmart in the toy section next to, like,
My Little
Barbies on
Pony.
one aisle, and then here's like a naked fly dude like right there, so that after church everybody could go see it. Like, no, it's not. That's not how it works. It's like, no, it's at a game convention, or it's online where you have your own audience, and if your audience is like, yeah, that's fucking awesome, then, like, do it. Do it.
I don't
I say
know.
embrace your audience. Don't think about the people that aren't your audience. Because that's the thing. If people are not playing your game and they are not buying your game, but they're running their mouth telling you what you should do to change your game, like, they can shut the fuck up. I
Yeah.
don't care. I don't care what they say. Like, you're not playing it, you're not buying it, you're pretty much irrelevant to me. And if you're trying to spin it as like, well, I might consider doing this if you make these changes, it's like, well, you can fuck off. I don't care. I'm gonna have butts, and maybe we'll have, wieners on the cover next time. I don't know. I don't know. It depends. If the artist wants to do it, like, it's fine. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, I know, right? Haraji, he got kind of, there's one cover I think he kind of regretted doing.
Sure.
But yeah, but he was still, I think he was still behind it. That, like, whatever they told him, he's like, whatever, like, just do it. It's like,
Exactly.
I'm not really comfortable with this, but go ahead. But,
Exactly. Now,
uh,
the one thing that gets tricky though sometimes is when you do something and, like, people interpret it in a way that you totally didn't intend for it to be, and then you're like, oh shit, maybe they're like, their interpretation is legitimate potentially. I wasn't even thinking about that. Like,
right,
I don't know if I necessarily want to bring up, well, Bradgie, but, like, well, I guess I will.
right,
Because I think he did for Gen Con, he always makes a little flyer to hand out of, like, here's all the titles that we have, and he has amazing artwork on the covers of these. And, like, for one of them, he had a bunch of kids on pikes as, like, a joke, because,
right.
it was kids on bikes is very
Yeah,
popular. But
yeah,
then here's
yeah.
all of these kids and they're on pikes and whatever, which is like, I mean, I think it's a great thing, whatever. It clearly communicates a lot of stuff. But then people tried to take it and spin it as like, oh, you're attacking the people who made the game called Kids on Bikes, which is like, number one, that's bullshit. But number two, like, I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe that wasn't the best example, but of something, because I mean that it wasn't intended whatsoever. And it's like the theme or the idea of the quote unquote kids on bikes has been around for a lot longer than the one group that made the game called that.
Right.
But yeah, so it can always blow up in your face, I guess, maybe is what I'm saying. But even then, did it actually blow up in his face? Because I don't know that it did. But
No,
I don't know.
yeah. It's yeah, it is definitely a world, and I don't know, and I think for, going back to the ash cheeks, it does
Mhm.
convey a genre. Like Frazetta really kind of, we'll blame
Yes.
Frazetta, but boy, it does set the color palettes and the style. It just sets a very strong mood. Like
Yeah,
I don't know why it does what it does, but it does.
it does. It sets the mood, it sets the tone, it sets the vibe, it sets the whole thing. You know what it is. The cover is clearly communicating what is inside the book, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So I think, and that's what's, going back to that. It's like, and I don't know what we're going to do. Probably not do that, but going back to Erie, but even like with the Erie, well, I just say the Warren comics, Warren magazines with the Vampire Ella, Erie, Creepy. Can't think of the other. Do you ever read any of those?
Some of them, like some of the older pulps and stuff. Is that
Well,
what
yeah,
you mean? Or that there's the new ones that are like that?
no, there's a series. So basically,
Maybe not.
they were slightly, they're very, some of the covers were fairly
Mhm.
lurid. And the comic book authority, they would do things in these. It's like horror comics, but the comic books authority would not allow them to do that. So then they created these in magazine format. So they're just comic books in magazine format that
Oh, yeah,
allowed,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Is
yeah,
it the Erie magazine, the ones from, like, the '60s is what you
70s,
or
yeah.
'70s, yeah, 60 okay, yeah,
Yeah, so
okay.
but those are another ones are just great for setting the tone and the mood.
Mhm, yeah. Well, no, I mean, I like it that it's that whole thing where it's like, "Screw you guys, I'm gonna do my own thing,
Yeah,
so here it is."
exactly. You won't let me do this in a comic book? I'll make the comic book a magazine.
Right. And I think that that's one of the things that's really nice about the RPG scene, the indie RPG scene, is that people can do that and people are doing that, and so it's just like, keep rolling. It's great. And the thing is that if you have people that are saying like, "Oh, I don't like that. I don't want to see that depicted." Well, it's like you don't have to buy it. It's already a niche of a niche of a niche of a niche anyway,
Yeah.
and you can make your own thing. Like I'm not stopping you from making your thing and putting whatever you want on the cover of it. I'm just, I'm doing this.
You'd have to be pretty big to do this, and I don't know if there'd be any value, but I kind of wonder if you do like a two different covers,
Right.
and then
I mean,
do the one just be a low volume run.
it could, but I don't even see what the again, I think it goes back to like if they're people that you know are actually your audience and they're actually buying your stuff and playing your stuff and running your stuff, then maybe listen to them. But I think that there's a lot more people who don't buy your stuff, who don't play your stuff, but they run their mouth all the time saying that you should
Well,
be making
I'm
changes to
not
cater
saying
to
that
them.
you're doing it because of them, but I mean, you could like say this is the
Oh,
one, but
sure.
there's another one, kind of like the alternate comic book cover kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So
I mean, and on that, like Hot Springs Island is not the right thing, and Swordfish Islands is not the right thing. But I mean, I have two little kids of my own, and I would love to have like a kid friendly game because I do think that is one of the things that I feel, when I go to these conventions, it's like there's not stuff for kids at them.
no,
Which I understand, but at the same time, it's like, you need fresh blood. And so you can't, if you have butt cheeks on the cover of every single one of your books, then, yeah, mom isn't going to let the 11-year-old have that. Now, it's the thing that the 15-year-old wants or
yeah,
whatever, which is fine. But like, who has their own job and can potentially go out and
yeah.
get that. But like, your fourth grader is not going to be able to play that game and they don't need to play that game and it doesn't need to be about that. And that's the thing too where I'm like I don't think that like my books are about that, but like I'm not going to shy away from those things. Um so I don't know. But yeah, I definitely see a lot of value in having something that is kid friendly, family friendly, fun to play, that isn't all like gore and horror and, creepy stuff and then butts on the cover. Like there's room for both of those things, but I think that if your thing is one of those, if your thing is, the adult thing, then I think it's super okay to put the adult stuff on the cover. I would rather have a whole separate offering that's like this is to introduce people to the genre, this is to bring people into the thing. And that has its own cover that communicates its thing in its way, as opposed to making like an alternate cover for, the adult thing to try and
Well, and
make it more
you're
palatable.
buying at such volumes that it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I don't think it's that bad actually. If you're doing like an offset print run, if you did want to have like a separate cover, um, for like a small run, I do think because the inside is the same. Um, the they're going to be buying the same, especially if it's like an art cover, right? Like they're going to be buying the same amount of chipboard or whatever to make the hardcover part of it. They're still going to have to do 1,500 units of being sewn together. So if you're saying like I want 200 of these to have this different cover, it's not going to be that expensive,
Oh, I did not
I
know
think.
that.
Yeah, I mean, it will be an expense, but I don't think it's gonna. Well, I mean, obviously I could eat these words, but I don't think it's gonna be as
Right.
expensive. It might be, right?
Well, right. It's not the same as right because it's not the same as these non whatever that's called, the non-offset printers. Uh,
Right. Print on
runs the
demand,
it's just
digital press.
yeah, exactly, the digital press. So you're right because they're just printing out a bunch of pages, another set of pages, and then they're like, well,
Hmm.
I'm making a lot of assumptions, but anyway, right? Because the process is yeah, yeah, it's probably all separated. Well, maybe it's not. I assume it's all separate, printed separate, like so many pages, like the 4 pages
Hmm.
or however many pages they do before they fold it and cut it, are being ran, and then later on they're put together. And
Yeah,
at
well,
that
because
point, they're
actually, sorry, but actually, but thinking about that, yeah, I mean, that's what I did with the World Builders Notebook, right? I did 4 colors, so I did a print run. I did 1,000 of each cover, so I did a job for 1,000, but there were, or I did a job for 4,000, but then there were 1,000 black, 1,000 blue, 1,000 red, 1,000 gray. Um, so yeah, and it wasn't astronomical to have the variant covers, if you will. So yeah, that's definitely an option.
hmm, hmm, hmm. We're a little ways from that. I think we're not going to
Sure,
go to that degree, and I don't know our run's going to be high enough. But if
sure.
it is, you never know.
Hmm.
Hmm. So what are you working on now, or what's the next thing that you're? If you could talk about the next secret project.
Well, I mean, it's not really a secret because it's just it's Marlowe's Mire, which is the next of the Swordfish Islands. And that is in the works, and I did the Kickstarter for that last year. Um, and it was supposed to just be a 48-page booklet, which if it was just a 48-page booklet, it would definitely be done by now. But then people were like, no, make it more. So I'm making it more, and now it's delayed, or I mean, I don't know if it's delayed. It changed. So I don't know. I need
Scope
to figure
creep.
it out. Yeah, of course, it's totally scope creep. It's totally scope creep. But also, the thing is that I had a critical need. Like we needed to reprint Hot Springs Island because we were almost out, and we needed to move the warehouse. And if we did it, it would have wiped us out of like everything that we had, which would have been a huge risk. So it was like, well, let's do this little thing that's 48 pages and just knock it out and get it going. And so I should have stuck to my guns and said, no, that's what it's going to be. Um, Probably. But now I'm in a new spot because I said it's going to be something different, and now I need to, actually deliver. So it's happening. We're working on it. We've been play testing it. I'm happy with how it is. But part of it too is that like I'm now really having to stick to my guns because I think Marlowe's is a small island. It's only 4 hexes. Hot Springs is 25 hexes. So it has 75 locations, whereas Marlowe's has 12 locations. One, then we kind of added another one, but or we kind of added 2 more. So we're a little loose with it, but it works and it's good. But because it's a small island, and the thing that I feel is holding us back, or is slowing things down. I don't know, holding us back is not the right word, but slowing us down is that we want it to be a place that's full of people. And I feel like presenting a place that's full of people is something that has been hard for me and something that has not been like I feel pretty weak at it. Like one of the things I ran the Mothership campaign. Oh my gosh, and I'm gonna blank on it. It's the one that's like the Die Hard spoof. That's
I don't know.
oh my gosh. I ran it for my guys. They loved it. It was good. We had a good time. But hmm, Dying Hard on Hard Light Station. Thank you. Sorry. Apologize for that. But yeah, Dying Hard on Hard Light Station. Really good, but it's taking place on a space station at Christmas time, and there is sort of like an alien outbreak, and there's also these sort of like a cleanup crew, like mercenaries that are coming and showing up at the same time. But it's supposed to be like a Christmas party environment where you have people all over the place, and they're running and they're screaming and they're doing all kinds of stuff, and they're trying to escape and whatever, and the players are in there. And like as I was running it, I was just like, I feel like this is an empty place, and the only people that are in here are the players. Like I'm not putting in enough NPCs. I'm not putting in enough, stuff like that. And so for Marlowe's, where it's like, well, we want to have basically you kind of have sort of like a debtor colony, if you will. You have all these people that are there like salvaging shipwrecks and stuff. And I want there to be people all over the place that are working, that are doing stuff. And so how do you do that and make it easy for the dungeon master to be like, okay, I've you guys have an encounter with some NPCs, like how do we make that relevant, interesting, necessary? How do we make it feel full, and that you're kind of in this milieu of other stuff where you're not really important. I think it's easier to do that if it's like you're in the jungle and there's monsters in the jungle. But if it's like there's other intelligent humanoids that you can be interacting with at any given moment, I think that's a lot harder to
Right,
pull
because
off.
their motivations are different. Where
Right.
the dinosaur's it's either hungry gonna eat you, or it's just gonna be an obstacle to get where you want from where you want to get in your
Yeah.
way from getting where you want to go. Like we got to get through this triceratops,
Yeah.
herd without causing them to stampede or whatever.
Yeah. And so whereas this, we have like a couple of guys who've got bags who are on their way to go to the cave to harvest like bat guano because they're going to sell it. So I mean, are they going to try and steal from you? Are they going to try and murder you? Are they going to, size you up like because they have a shady background, or, what do we do with that? Or does it even matter? Should we be even spending the time on this? And I think we should be. So I'm doing it. Um,
And you're
because
keeping
one
it.
of oh no,
And the problem is keeping that all within 48 pages too, right?
well, we're definitely beyond 48
No, but
pages.
but
We're
I'm just
but
saying is when your ambition is to say, we need to populate this island, it's like that's
yeah.
another thing that the page count starts increasing when it's beyond just doing a short stat block for a tricer. Well, I guess you don't do
Yep.
stat blocks for monsters, do you?
But no, we don't. But
Yeah,
still, yes, we would still have like a description and everything
yeah.
of them. But yeah, it does creep having all that kind of stuff in it. And so it's like, well, how do we make these tables relevant, and how do we do that? But also I do think that there's a real problem. Like, I love the fact that Hot Springs Island is system neutral. I want all of the stuff to be system neutral. I think that system neutrality is very important. And I think that it's one of the sort of biggest selling points, if you will, of um, what I'm doing. But at the same time, that makes it only accessible for people who've been around. So it's really good for people who've been around for a while. So one of the things that we've been trying to figure out, and I think we've accomplished, um, and that we've been playtesting recently, is just so Mike Evans, who wrote Hubris, and he wrote this thing called Orcs, and he's done Death is the New Pink and a bunch of stuff like that. His DIY RPG productions with the little middle finger for the logo.
That is a
Um,
new pink.
yes, Death is the New Pink. Yeah, no, he's got great stuff, but like man, I don't know, it was 2019 maybe at Gen Con. He ran a game after hours upstairs in like one of the hotels in like the bar or whatever, and there were 12 of us, I believe, that all came, and he just ran a game for everybody, and he called it like the meat grinder rule system. And it's a even more stripped down version or simplified version of DCC's funnel in a lot of ways, because you start with 4 characters, and your 4 characters have 4 hit points apiece, and that's it. So it's much more brutal, but once you have that, that's all you have to do in order to start. And you basically have like a 50% chance of success if you're going to try and do anything. So it's like, oh, I want to try and hit the monster. Cool. You roll an 11 or higher and you hit the monster, but the monster is pretty much always going to hit you. So getting in combat is not a great thing. And so he was kind enough to give us permission to basically like use that with kind of some modifications, not really a lot of modifications, but just to have that so that we could put it there with Marlowe's, as, hey, so if you are playing for the first time and you don't know what system you're going to use, and you don't know what, like, with these 4 pages, you can, excuse me, you can start playing with your friends like immediately. And so here it is. And Marlowe's, being a small island that's centrally located, is also connected to all of the other islands. So there's kind of like extraneous work, or not extraneous work, but like there's work that we need to do with those others to make sure that we have good connections and good ties. So it's like, okay, maybe you start on Marlowe's and then you go to other places, from there, which then additionally makes it a positioning situation, because it's like, well, what is this book? How do we sell this book if I go to a convention? Do I call it, oh, it's the Dark of Marlowe's Mire, um which makes sense in terms of like Swordfish Islands and how I've been doing that stuff. But I don't think we're going to call it that. I think we're currently, right now, I'm thinking about calling it Castaway in the Swordfish Islands, because it works on two levels, right? You've got people, a shipwreck survivor is a castaway, and then since it's like a debtor's colony, the people that are on it have been cast away from society. Um, so calling it something like that, where it's like Castaway in the Swordfish Islands, or Castaway in the Swordfish Islands. Um, and so it has all the information for Marlowe's. It has all the connections to the other islands. It has sort of like context for the other islands and the Swordfish Islands as a whole. And then it also has all of the content on Marlowe's itself, as well as a whole bunch of stuff about shipwrecks and generating your own shipwrecks. And like, here's stuff that you can find on a shipwreck, or what's in the box, or what's in the thing. So tables like that, uh, as well as like some dungeons and stuff. So
Have you ever been
yeah.
tempted to just actually do another version, but just like when it's already existing and then just make it dedicated to a system?
Well, in the perfect world, if I had all the money in the world, what I would do is I would have the system neutral book. So like, you'd get the Dark of Hot Springs Island and maybe the field guide, but then there would be a paperback companion book, if you will, that's like, here is how you do Hot Springs Island for Dungeon Crawl Classics. And then there's a separate one, and again, in my perfect world, I would have like Doug Kovacs, who does all the DCC art. I would have him do the cover of the DCC Hot Springs Island, like, I don't know, whatever that book would be called. Uh, so then it has all the stats for all the monsters, and it has all the DCC specific like rule stuff in it. And then I would want to do one like that for 5th edition D&D, or 1 D&D, or whatever the next thing is, or Pathfinder, so that then you have these conversion kits, if you will, that then give you the context of like, well, here's how you do this in Pathfinder, and here's how you do it in 5th edition, and here's how you do it in, you know, Into the Odd. Here's how you do it in Mothership. It's real crazy. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know about that. But yeah.
So is it what's holding you back is because obviously you have a limited amount of time and you want to put the money your time into going forward rather than expanding out what already exists?
Um well, I mean, I am so doing Marlowe's is expanding out. I feel like that's going deeper into
Well, I mean
what
expanding out as far as system wise, not
yeah.
setting wise. So like you can either go deeper into your setting or you can spread out and hit more systems. But
Right.
you're
Well, that's the thing. I definitely want to go deeper into my setting. I'm not really interested in going out to a lot of systems, but I also feel like I think it's very important to have a like, hey, if you get this, you can just sit down and start playing. Because if you're new, because I do feel like there's still a significant amount of people that are like, I've never run anything like this before. I've always wanted to play D&D or something, and so it just feels very nice to be able to say like, hey, well, if you take this, um like, you can get playing with your friends in 15 minutes. And I think that that's a very powerful thing, not just for being able to sell the books, but I mean, if people are the important thing is people running the game, more so than buying the book. I mean, uh and so I want people to be able to run the game. And so if I'm like, hey, here's a very simple rules slight system that will just get you playing immediately. Because the idea with this funnel, right, is that you play like a game, maybe two, depending on how long it goes. But at the end of that game, at the end of that session, you then take one of your surviving characters, or your only surviving character, and you turn them into a real character in whatever system you choose. So that then that way, instead of
oh
having a
yeah.
session zero where everybody sits down at the table and is like, what story are we going to tell? What game are we going to play? What things are we interested in? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, no, no. We're playing in the Swordfish Islands, and session zero is we're going to play, and we're going to start going right now. And so then you basically make your backstory for your character on the fly. It's like, oh yeah, my guy got like ripped apart by zip birds and is missing like his pinky finger, because that actually happened to me. But now, it's not just your sort of standard background story of like, oh yes, my parents were killed by orcs, and I was raised on the hard streets of the capital
Yeah.
city, and was a
I'm
street
I'm
urchin and had to
secretly a prince,
steal.
but I've
And
there was
yes,
a
yeah,
coup and I've been swept away and waiting for
right,
reclaim my kingdom one day.
right, yes, yes, yes. This way, it's just like, no, you're somebody. Your past doesn't matter. You spent some time on this island. Here's what happened to you, in this time, and now you just lean into that and roll with it. And I think that's a better. Um, I prefer doing things that way, quite a bit. So yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, and I kind of think it's even philosophical in a way I didn't really think about, like, how we view our past and is our past baggage or not. I mean, even on a personal level, I
Hmm.
just now kind of I don't know why it came to mind. It's like,
But yeah, I think that's super legit because it is. And how do you incorporate that in there? And I know that there are a lot of people that they want to tell like super elaborate stories with what has already happened to their character. And I guess I'm much more into, I want stories to emerge from the game that you're playing right now, and not necessarily. I don't feel like I've ever been in a game where it's been successfully executed, in my opinion, where it's like, okay, if I say that my character has a sibling or somebody that they potentially care about, then the only thing that ever seems to happen from doing that is like, well, the DM's going to have them show up to kill them or maim them or take them away, or they're going to try and use them to motivate my character in some way. And I don't know,
I
it
think
always
what I've
feels.
enjoyed, I think about, especially, I guess it would only be at con games, but I think I would
Mhm.
even enjoy this in real life, in my own actual games, is that'd be playing it, would be that I would be handed a character
Yes.
and certain details of the history was already laid out, like not detailed, but personality and some history. And now the challenge is to play whatever that character is true to that character.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I love about Into the Odd, right? Is that with Into the Odd, when you make your character, you take your hit points and your highest stat, and there's like a table, there's like a little matrix, and you
Oh,
find where your character is. And when you do that, it gives you just a very small background. Like it'll be like a sentence or two sentences, and it starts you with something. So if you have like super shitty stats and low hit points, maybe it gives you a gun, and
oh,
you
that's
have.
genius.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I love that about Into the Odd. It's probably my favorite part of the whole thing, um, because it's just enough to get you going. It's like a little kernel, that can grow into all these different ways, and it's based on what you roll. And so it's just like boom, here it is. You have your little thing, and you're like, okay, so I've got a meat cleaver, and I was a butcher, and I lost my shop. So I'm adventuring now because I guess that's what I'm doing. And then you can just sort of fall back on that in so many ways when it comes up, and you're like, oh yeah, I'll just chop the monster up. We could sell it for parts, or we'll make bone broth out of it or something. And then
Right.
you don't have to have the whole elaborate, fantasy milieu story
Right.
to go with or to
Yeah, and I
do.
think it gets harder, obviously harder the more people playing at the table too.
Hmm.
That also makes it complicated, I
Yep.
think. And it's and it, yeah, I guess this question. So like, have you ever played uh so like have you ever played like Smallville?
I have not.
So we created a game. It was just a sci-fi game, but we actually spent sessions kind of creating the background, the history, and the people and
Hmm.
relationships, which was really kind of cool because then characters come into the game with already having determined like and knowing all the background,
Hmm.
which was pretty satisfying, which was kind of neat. But in order to make that work, everybody has to be committed to it. And I think the same thing
Right.
probably with any sort of background. It's like the problem is like if a character creates this background and only the player cares about it, nobody else cares about it, that can be a problem.
Yes, absolutely.
But if you create a situation where everybody's kind of tied into everybody else somehow, and people are somehow in some ways invested in other people's background in a way
Yep.
that makes sense with the NPCs that are actually important in the story, not just how am I going to figure in this, aunt that, or whatever, or uncle or best friend from college,
Right.
then it works. But it has to be the whole table has to be invested, and it has to be that kind of game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that one of the things that I would really, really, really like to finish, that I have this incomplete project that's had multiple names at this point. But like the thing that I want to do is I want to try and capture the idea that like you are from a small town that is secluded in a mountain valley. Like you're from there, because I think that that's kind of the thing, is like when you make these characters, like you're not really from the world. You don't have any knowledge of the world. You don't know what the connections are. Like you've just made up the fact that there's an aunt. You've made up your own, like, grandmother or whatever, for your own personal story thing. Whereas I would really like to have something where it's like, you're from this small village in the mountains. It's relatively isolated. Um, in addition to getting a character sheet, you get some kind of informational sheet that shows you your connections to the other people, that does that. That's like, hey, so, you're part of this family, and your family has this kind of relationship with the other families in the valley. And then what you do is, then you have basically like a zombie outbreak, or, some sort of like
Oh,
catastrophe comes there. So then it's like, now you can look at your sheet and you can be like, well, I have a grandma in hex 2, and I want to go save my grandma in hex 2, but then somebody else at the table is like, well, I have, a cousin and 6, kids on the west side of the valley,
oh, I
so
see what
like
you're
we should go
saying.
over there.
So really,
So
the
then,
relationships
yeah,
would be, but see, the thing is, let's say you had a template,
yeah,
and then you filled in the template, and then the
hmm,
relationships maybe you rolled. Like maybe all of a sudden, then you find out once you have Aunt May and Uncle Bill and your buddy Fred, then you roll and you find out, oh, this person's had an affair with this
yeah,
person.
yeah,
This
yeah.
person has stolen from this person, and
Okay,
that could be kind of cool too.
for sure.
Without having, or if it could both be you generate the inputs, but then you also randomly kind of maybe roll some of the relations. The problem with
Yeah.
like the Smallville thing is it just took a long time to do. It was
Mm,
very fun. The game we played, only it wasn't Smallville. We used that system to generate the background. We only played like 3 sessions.
okay.
It was a very satisfying 3 sessions, but it was just like that was it. We're done. Like we don't need to
Sure.
do anymore.
Okay. Interesting.
But I was thinking like the Mad Libs, if you can
Yeah.
something along those lines.
Mhm. Well, because I think that that's the thing, right? Is that I think that the problem is that ultimately, when you're playing in a tabletop role playing game, you are a stranger in a strange land, but you want to be playing a character who is from there. And I feel like a lot of sort of problems come from that. Um, Especially in like people's perceptions of like metagaming and stuff, right? Like, for my perspective is that it's like, okay, so if my person grew up in a world where there are real trolls that are going around and eating people and eating cows and sheep and chickens and stuff like that, like I feel like there would be fairy tales and stories that people would tell their children, that like, this is what trolls are,
Yeah.
and they're weak against fire, because you need to know that information in order to survive in this world. And I feel like there are some people that are like, no, no, it's supposed to be like a surprise to your character. And I'm like, but that character is from this world that's dealing with this troll problem all the time. Like, why? Like, don't get mad at me because I know that the troll is weak against fire. Don't make it this arbitrary thing, whatever. And so having those connections, trying to come up with like a way to give your player sort of meaningful choices based on things from the world. I mean, that's part of the whole reason that I made the field guide, is because it's like, your character knows nothing about this place. They're in a sandbox. They can go north, south, east, or west. It doesn't really matter. If they don't know anything, if they don't know that they have some kind of connection over here, or that there is some potential, like, MacGuffin over there, when you say like you can do anything you want, if they don't know what's available at all, like it brings a sandbox to a screeching halt. It makes it, everything's the same, so there's no reason to do it.
I think the problem is like, as I was somebody on Twitter, and I didn't respond, but they're arguing for highly, they call it simulationist games.
Mm,
Like, I'm like, what are they really simulating? Simulationist game. I mean, like, it really isn't a term that really even means anything, because it's like you're saying, is you can have all these complex rules of fighting, of combat, and of healing, and all this stuff, but it's not really simulating people that actually live in it.
yeah. Yeah.
It's like,
Well,
what are you
and you're
simulating?
you're expected to know all the rules about the fighting and the combat and the
Yeah.
healing and the stuff so that you can play, but then you're also expected to then not know anything about the people in the world or the lore of the world or the myths of the world, because then that's gonna spoil the game. And I'm like, I flatly reject that.
The other thing I was thinking too, it's like D&D, or even the more complicated games, there's very few things that actually simulate reality. All they're doing
Right.
is
Yeah.
simulating something, but they're not reality.
Well, to go back to those guys making those zines, I mean, and even when it's simulating reality, it's wrong because Gary
Yeah.
Gygax said that 50 feet of rope weighs 10 pounds, as they could show you that it doesn't. It's maybe 3 pounds. And,
Yes.
so it's like, and the thing too is that when you're really trying to do that, like I feel like that part of just managing all of those tiny little pieces really sucks. Like that's the stuff that a computer is very good at. Like a computer is good at
Right.
remembering, how much everything weighs and tracking it and knowing that you're over your encumbrance or whatever. Um,
But the
yeah,
fact is, in real world, a dagger stands a good chance of killing you.
right.
Every time a stab of the dagger has the potential to kill you. But if you're a 10th level character, it's going to take a lot of dagger hits to actually do anything to you.
Exactly.
People say, well,
Exactly.
the hit points don't represent, don't represent actual physical health. It's like it represents like luck or it's like then you're not simulating anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I think it was like
Absolutely.
interesting, like with the if you ever play any of the like a lot of the Cortex games, like the Smallville and the and I've not played Smallville itself, but like Firefly and a lot of these other things.
Yeah.
And I think even with some of the Powered by Apocalypse games is like the masks and such, they are simulating media and genres,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not simulate trying to simulate a combat action, but actual fiction. I think that's what D&D's kind of done. D&D's create its own niche fiction, and
Yeah.
then that's why nothing can be D&D because it's its own thing. It's not really simulating any book. You can never get the feeling of Elric or Hawkmoon or Conan playing D&D.
Yeah. Potentially. Yeah. Yeah. With the rules. One of the things I've been thinking about recently is that I feel like every time the people at Wizards of the Coast recently, like I watched the announcement that they did yesterday, day before, um, about the forthcoming virtual tabletop and things like that. But like I feel like when those guys that are working for Wizards of the Coast say Dungeons and Dragons, I think that they're actually saying Forgotten Realms. They're not really saying Dungeons and Dragons. They're saying Forgotten Realms.
Yeah.
Um, because my whole thing is like Dungeons and Dragons is specifically like, well, you're making your own world. Like here's a toolkit to make your own world is the way that I interpret that. But I think that the corporate interpretation is like, no, to play in our world, to do our, where there's Tasha and Xanathar and whatever and Dritz and all of them. Um, and I'm like, meh. So I don't know.
Well, and I think especially, and I'm speculating, but people come from the the uh the software field, and I
Hmm.
think also looking at IP,
Yeah.
that's they're like, what, our money is really in the IP, and the IP
Hmm.
really that even though they own many multiple IPs, I guess is right. Really, it's Forgotten Realms is where they're making their money, and
Yep.
probably none of the others will ever make the kind of money that they will ever get from Forgotten Realms.
Sure. Yeah. No, I agree with that. Well, and it enables them to go deep in the lore, right, on something, because so it's beneficial. It's easy for people to grasp. It gives the community things to dress up as that are recognizably part of, this is a Dungeons and Dragons thing, but it's like, no, it's a Forgotten Realms thing. Um, because you can't have like with Blizzard Entertainment with World of Warcraft. I mean, they had all of this lore and all of this stuff. So, Blizzard does BlizzCon, and they can have all of these people cosplaying as recognizable characters. So, like, somebody can dress up as like Tyrael the Archangel from Diablo, and everybody's going to know that, oh, that's Tyrael. Whereas I think that if you had a Wizards of the Coast was doing like a Gen Con, if people come and they're like dressed up as somebody, they're not necessarily recognizably going to be um you know, like the wizard from your world. No one's gonna know who that is. They're gonna, oh, it's
Right.
a wizard. That's really cool. But it's not like, oh, you're, you know, Jaina Proudmoore from Theramore or whatever. So I think by Wizards focusing kind of on Forgotten Realms, it does make a lot of sense, you know, on a lot of different
Well, it's
levels.
kind of going back to you know, with you, it's like we had discussions. It's like you have limited amount of time and
Right.
resources, even though arguably they have more.
Yes.
Like, but you know, they're going to really think of if they want return on their investment. So if they're going to spend, you know, $1 and Greyhawk's only going to give them $1.50 back, but if they put
Yep.
$1 in towards Forgotten Realms, it's going to give them $5 back. Why would
Done.
they ever
Yep.
consider Greyhawk?
Hmm.
I was
Absolutely.
I was hoping early on, which this never proved out. I was hoping early on that they would license the different properties to different companies.
Yeah.
Like Goodman Games, you know,
Hmm.
has got Greyhawk, and somebody else has got Dark Sun, and then
That'd be
they would
cool.
be. But that's never going to. I mean, it's very apparent now that will never, ever, 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 never, ever, ever happen.
Yep. Oh well. Maybe it's video games.
I don't think so. I don't think there's really an appetite. I think they're just going to keep it in the vaults. And well, I mean, they are making money off of drive through, but I don't think they're going to put any. I don't think there's going to be any effort. I think the only thing they're
Sure.
going to do is just draw out certain pieces out of things and put it into Forgotten Realms. Like,
Yeah.
I think, I don't know. It's hard to say, but even like with Star Frontiers, would love to you know, see something happen with that. I don't know that anything ever will. They'll just keep it in the safe.
Yep.
But anyway,
Bummer.
and they're much smarter with their money than I am. So I'm who am I to say? It's just that it is kind of weird, the things that, you know, people want, but they're just not going to get just because
Mhm.
of whatever reason. But anyway, it's I think we're hitting the time space continuum,
Oh
Jacob.
yeah. Rock
We're
on.
still suffering a bit of lag. I would say jet lag. I guess you've traveled farther, but
Still.
that was a very energizing, you know, and you going back to stating all the connections, making it worth it. I mean, for me, I didn't sign up for any games. I just met and talked with people,
Nice.
and it was very beneficial. And like even just the you know, the kind of hangout we did on Saturday night was
Yeah.
just yeah, just like
It was great. It was perfect.
so that's how we know about if we ever want to talk to some people about getting rid of bodies, we know at least two people who can take care of us.
Exactly. Exactly. But yeah, that was
Okay,
good.
well, you have a good night, Jacob, and until next time.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. Great to see you.
Oh, great seeing you too.